Aarav had always believed that life was a race he had to win, no matter the cost. Growing up in a small town, he carried the weight of his family's dreams on his shoulders. His father, a hard-working shopkeeper, had spent his entire life saving every rupee to give Aarav a better future, while his mother silently sacrificed her own needs so her son could study in a good college. Aarav knew all of this, yet somewhere along the way, he became so focused on success that he forgot to feel. His days turned into long hours of work, his nights into restless thoughts, and his heart into a place filled with anxiety and pressure. Despite achieving what many would call success, he felt an emptiness he could neither explain nor escape. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Aarav sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails, messages, reminders, but none of them brought him peace. Instead, they felt like chains pulling him deeper into a life he no longer recognized. That night, unable to sleep, he opened a dusty box of old belongings his mother had sent him months ago. Inside were letters, childhood photos, and a small book wrapped carefully in cloth. It was the Bhagavad Gita, a gift from his grandfather, who had always believed that true strength came not from the world outside but from mastering the mind within. Aarav had never paid attention to spiritual teachings before. To him, they were things people turned to when they had nothing else left. But that night was different. Something inside him felt broken, and he didn't know how to fix it. With hesitation, he opened the book and began to read. The words were simple yet powerful, speaking about duty, detachment, and inner peace. As he read about controlling the mind and focusing on actions rather than outcomes, he felt as if the book was speaking directly to him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or expectations. He was simply present. Days turned into weeks, and Aarav slowly made reading the Bhagavad Gita a part of his daily routine. Each morning, before the chaos of the day began, he would sit quietly and reflect on its teachings. He learned that suffering often comes from attachment to success, to validation, to the opinions of others. He realized that his constant anxiety wasn't because of the work itself, but because of his fear of failure and his desperate need to prove himself. The book taught him that true peace lies in doing one's duty sincerely without being consumed by the result. It was a simple idea, yet it changed everything. As Aarav began to practice these lessons, subtle changes started to appear in his life. He became more patient, not only with others but with himself. When things didn't go as planned, he no longer felt the same crushing disappointment. Instead, he reminded himself that effort was in his control but outcomes were not. This shift didn't make his problems disappear, but it made them easier to face. He began to listen more when his parents called, truly hearing their voices instead of rushing through conversations. He noticed the warmth in his mother's words and the quiet pride in his father's tone, things he had overlooked for years. One day, Aarav received news that shook him deeply. His father had fallen ill, and the situation was serious. Without a second thought, he took leave from work and returned home. The journey back felt longer than usual, filled with worry and regret. He kept thinking about all the times he had been too busy to visit, too distracted to care. But when he reached home, his father greeted him with a weak smile, as if nothing had changed. In that moment, Aarav realized that love doesn't measure time or absence. It simply exists, steady and patient. During those days at home, Aarav stayed by his father's side, helping with small tasks and spending time talking about life. His father shared stories of his own struggles, of how he had faced failures and hardships, but never lost hope. Life is not about controlling everything, his father said one evening, his voice gentle yet firm. It's about accepting what comes and doing your best with what you have. Aarav listened quietly, realizing how closely these words echoed the teachings he had been reading. It felt as though life itself was reinforcing the lessons he had just begun to understand. As his father slowly recovered, Aarav made a decision that surprised even himself. He chose to change the way he lived, not by abandoning his ambitions, but by redefining them. Success, he realized, was not just about achievements or recognition. It was about peace of mind, meaningful relationships, and the ability to stay grounded in the face of challenges. He returned to his work with a calmer mindset, focusing on giving his best without letting stress consume him. His colleagues noticed the difference, but more importantly, he felt it within himself. Months passed, and Aarav's life continued to evolve. He started helping others who were struggling with stress and self-doubt, sharing what he had learned in simple, relatable ways. He didn't preach or try to change anyone. He simply shared his experiences, hoping they might bring comfort to someone else. In doing so, he found a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The emptiness that once filled his heart was replaced with a quiet sense of fulfillment. One evening, as Aarav sat on his balcony watching the sunset, he thought about the journey he had been through. The challenges, the misunderstandings, the moments of doubt. All of them had shaped him into the person he had become. He realized that controlling the mind was not about eliminating thoughts or emotions, but about understanding them and not letting them control him. It was about finding balance, staying present, and trusting the process of life. He picked up the Bhagavad Gita once again, not as a book of answers, but as a companion on his journey. It had not solved all his problems, nor had it made life perfect. But it had given him something far more valuable, the ability to face life with courage, patience, and clarity. And in that, he found a kind of peace that no external success could ever provide. The story of Aarav is not about a man who changed his life overnight, but about someone who learned to see life differently. It reminds us that while we may not have control over everything that happens to us, we always have control over how we respond. Our thoughts, our actions, and our attitudes shape our reality far more than circumstances ever could. When we learn to control our mind, we don't just change our life, we transform the way we experience it. In the end, the true lesson is simple yet powerful. Life will always bring challenges, but peace comes from within. When we let go of unnecessary attachments, focus on our actions, and treat others with love and respect, we create a life that is not only successful, but meaningful. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all, not conquering the world, but mastering the self.